Hey, what's up everybody? Commander Radix here bringing you another episode of Transformers Lore, or should I say more specifically, Transformers More Lore. Now I know it has been over a year since the last episode of Transformers More Lore. You'd think that we're doing this on an annual basis by this point in time. We're not. Ideally, I want to try to make this a monthly series and not an annual series where a year and a half goes by between episodes, but whatever. Let's focus on the now. We are here in Transformers More Lore. If you don't know, since it's been over a year, Transformers More Lore is a sub-series within Transformers Lore, where I take your questions and I answer your questions in just, quick little answers. It's a lore Q&A show. So with that in mind, if you have any questions about Transformers lore, about anything in the Transformers multiverse, leave a question in the comments below, and hopefully I'll get to it on the next episode of Transformers More Lore. Now I will say, we had a lot of questions for this episode, so I am going to have to limit it a bit for time constraints. I don't want to edit a video for 5 years like the most recent History and Lore video that's coming out, or has come out. Took a long time. But without any further ado, let's get into your questions. You brave people who have waited over a year, almost a year and a half for this. Captain Henson asks, what characters who are home to the Tyrant cluster have traveled to different universes? Which, by the way, Captain Henson, a great channel. I highly recommend you check Captain Henson out. I'll put a link to his channel in the description. So characters native to the Tyrant cluster who've jumped universes. There are some, not many, but there are some. One that comes to mind that's truly home to the Tyrant cluster would be Sideways. The Sideways of the Revenge of the Fallen Jr. novel jumped universes. The Sideways of the Revenge of the Fallen video game jumped universes. You can see my Transformers lore video on other dimension-hopping Sidewayses for more information on that. They show up towards the end of the video. One notable example of a Tyrant Transformer jumping universes is there was a Tyrant Megatron, not from any specific universe. He's sort of from the universe that he's from. But he experienced and won the Battle of Chicago, which was the main battle at the end of Transformers Dark of the Moon. He won the Battle of Chicago, a lot happened, that universe goes off on its own timeline until he ends up dimension jumping into the Nexus cluster, into the Axiom Nexus, that is the timeline, the universe of the Transtechs. And he's going to take on the name C-81, because the Transtechs don't allow people named Megatron into the Axiom Nexus. If you want to know more about him, you can read the Transformers timeline story, Cybertron's Most Wanted, that is about C-81, this Megatron that won the end of Dark of the Moon, went on to become a conqueror and then get kicked into the Axiom Nexus. Another interesting Tyrant universe jumping moment is in the Beast Wars Diorama series picture story, which technically happens in the Japanese G1 cartoon universe, but a lot of 2007 era Tyrant Transformers from their own universe, it doesn't seem to be from a specific point in time in the movie, perhaps maybe the Battle of Mission City, but it seems to be from their own Tyrant universe. They end up stuck in Primex 785 06 Alpha, the Japanese G1 cartoon universe. And they're there for a little bit to fight in the Beast Wars of all things, and then they go home. So the cast of the 2007 movie have jumped universes. Patroclus Iliad 233 says, here's a question. One thing I had always found interesting about the Transformers afterlife, it could, or used to be, easily explained by sci-fi concepts. Primus was the Allspark was Primus, all sparks came from it and went from it, but the amalgamated consciousness of it that preceded the Cybertronian race basically identified itself as Primus. In effect, pre-Shroud Primus was a higher dimensional energy field, a dimension of its own permeating various other universes, resulting in the Transformers. Now, how do they explain the Allspark dimension? Are they all still linked, or is it one glob of Allspark essence per universe? So a few things here. I would not agree with your definition of Primus and the Allspark, pre-Shroud or post-Shroud. For the record, if I'm talking about anything after the Shroud, I am going to say post-Shroud, after the Shroud. The Transformers lore series focuses almost exclusively on the pre-Shroud days. So anything I say on any video ever, if I don't specify otherwise, assume I'm talking pre-Shroud. As for explaining the Allspark post-Shroud, there is no explanation for things post-Shroud. Once we get after the Shroud, it's on a universe-by-universe basis. You don't need to care about the context of other universes. They're not linked because the multiverse is ripped apart. There's no link in the afterlife. There is no one Primus. There is no one Afterspark, or Allspark, or Afterlife. It's completely unrelated. The writers of whatever universe are free to make up whatever they want for whatever continuity they're writing in. And I would disagree with the idea of Primus being an energy field, their higher dimension energy field. He was very clearly created as an astral being, something more comparative to a god. He had a defined body, he had a defined essence, a defined sentience that can be at odds with the Allspark, right? Now, the Allspark as a realm sort of exists within him in a way, but it is not him. So this comes down to, can this afterlife stuff, can it be explained as a purely scientific or sci-fi-like phenomenon? And the fact of the matter is, no. Transformers, at least pre-Shroud Transformers, multiversal Transformers, Transformers lore, Transformers that has lore, is ultimately, when you get down to it, not science fiction in the sense, if you define science fiction as a fictional universe where everything can be explained by either real or at least in-universe scientific principles. The Transformers multiverse does not work like that. There are straight-up gods in the Transformers multiverse. There is straight-up magic in the Transformers universe. And the earlier you go back in time, the more science as a, non-supernatural thing starts to break down, especially when we're looking at Primus and Unicron. They definitely have some sci-fi themes and concepts interspliced within it, but when you hear the argument of people saying that Star Wars is ultimately a fantasy universe that is dressed up like a sci-fi universe, Transformers is in a very similar situation to that. Again, there are different definitions for sci-fi and whatever, but I'm pointing out that not everything in Transformers can be explained from a purely material, scientific, even science fiction-y way. Which is actually related to our third question from Godzilla Fan 1984. So when the spark is extinguished, destroyed, the soul within goes to the afterlife. That's a very good question. Because if we want to take the sci-fi route, if everything is material and scientific, then the spark should be equivalent to the Cybertronian soul. Now, the spark can get destroyed. We can see it be crushed. But the Transformers themselves is actually going to the Allspark, to the afterlife, what have you. Which does suggest that there is an immaterial reality to the material reality of the spark, the energy pulse, the fragment of Primus's spark, right? That's the material, but the immaterial is there is actually there's actually a soul, right? So I think Godzilla Fan 1984's explanation is actually pretty solid. The Lord Darkmount says, "Excuse me, Commander, but aren't the Aligned Continuity Quintessons specifically said to be small organic squid-like beings, or are there aligned universes where they are more mechanical?" Good question. Yes, the Quintessons in the Aligned universe are small squid things. They are squids, and I don't mean like squid-esques, but like literal like cephalopod-looking aliens, right? They're described in different colors. They're small. Now, they do pilot other sorts of whatever creature they're sort of enslaving. So if they're enslaving the Transformers, they have sort of mechanical bodies that they can pilot, right? I think Cyberverse has a similar concept to this. I haven't seen much of Cyberverse. I don't remember this well, but I vaguely remember there being something like this in Cyberverse. The Quintessons themselves aren't actually the multi-face changing robot that's hovering around with tentacles. The Quintessons are tiny little squid beings. You know, if any of you guys were fans of Animorphs, if you think of like, what were they called? The Yeerks or whatever? The tiny little slug aliens that possessed people? The Quintessons in the Union Cluster are more like that. Now we have quite a few questions from Salu BC. We don't have enough time to get into all of them. There's one question that I think is interesting to answer here, and we're going to save the rest of the questions for a future episode of Transformers More Lore. My intention is to get to all of these questions eventually, but we're not going to do them all in one go. Specifically, I'm looking at question number 8. How many total universes are there? How big is the multiverse? Well, we have some differing counts, right? The Axiom Nexus has counted around 15,962,782 universes. Weirdly, they ain't got nothing on the Autobots of the Dreamwave Armada comics, who did a scan of the multiverse searching for Optimus Prime when he got lost in the multiverse. For some reason, they were able to scan more universes than the Trans-Techs of all people were able to. They were able to scan 75,890,007 universes. It's like almost 6 times more than what the Trans-Techs found. I don't know what's going on there. Now, that is happening during the Unicron battles. It is possible that Unicron could have consumed like another 60 million universes between that count and the Trans-Tech count. Bugbite of the GoBots estimates that there's over 15 quadrillion universes in the multiverse, which is intense. But ultimately, all these different efforts to scan the multiverse to try to figure out how many universes there are is ultimately kind of in vain, because I believe it's Vector Prime or Alpha Trion or someone, I don't remember who, but in Balancing Act, he references the fact that there is actually an infinite amount of universes in the multiverse. The multiverse is infinite, which really puts things into perspective when we say that the multiverse exists within the Megaverse and the Megaverse exists within the Omniverse, because that means the Omniverse is holding inside of it the Megaverse, and the Megaverse is holding within it something that's already infinite, which is not philosophically or mathematically or metaphysically possible, but whatever. The multiverse is infinite in Transformers lore. Now, if your question is how many universes have shown up, that gets tricky. How many universes have been named with a Trans-Tech notation? That's in the hundreds of named Trans-Tech universes, although many of them overlap. Many of them are referring to the same universe, just at a different point in time. And for the amount of universes we've seen, we'll look at it this way. Every commercial, every toy bio, all those count as their own universes. Sometimes multiple toy bios and multiple commercials can share a universe, but you get the idea. So good luck trying to count how many Transformers universes we have seen, and remember that you also have to include things like Zoids, Brave X Kaiser, any iteration of G.I. Joe, a real American hero. But the in-universe answer is it's infinite. And that's all of our questions we're going to answer here today on this episode of Transformers More Lore. If you have any questions about Transformers lore, please leave your questions in the comments below. I'll get to them, or try to get to them, in the next episode of Transformers More Lore. Hopefully the new episode will be like next month and not next year, but you know, I'm slow. But that's going to wrap up this video. Follow me on social media. All the links are in the description. If you're interested in real-life lore, real-life history, consider subscribing to my history and lore channel, which is Radix the Lore Keeper. The link is in the description. If you want to ask me questions, Commander Radix questions, not Transformers lore questions, but Radix questions, you can ask questions in the most recent Community's Comments episode. But there you have it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day, ladies and gentlemen.